This week in IT SPARC Cast, Microsoft finds a backdoor in Windows and leaves it open. Windows just can't shut down. And Google and SpaceX are putting data centers in space.
Be more fun if it was pigs.
Greetings and welcome to IT SPARC Cast News Bytes. I'm your host, John Barker.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Let's get into an exciting week.
It's Monday, November 10th, and IT SPARC Cast News Bytes is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years of experience working in IT or for IT vendors. And it's time for a new segment that we like to call IT in Space. And if you're a Muppets fan, then you'll understand that. If you're not, then you just think we're insane.
So let me build a picture for you. You ready for this? So Google's next Moonshot is putting TPUs into space with Project Suncatcher. And let me build you a quick podium to stand on to understand this. We've been talking a lot for over the as long as we've been doing this podcast over the energy requirements for data center. And especially as AI's been catching on, how many more data centers they want to build, where are they going to get the power for this? So to give you some idea, we've covered a lot of small modular reactors, large reactors coming back online, multiple vendors such as NVIDIA and OpenAI promising tens of gigawatts of data center capability. And there was a new one we didn't cover last week, but I'll bring it up real quick now. Right now, you cannot get used commercial jet engines anymore, right? The data center folks are buying up the older jet engines. And I'm not just talking like CF-56s, the old 747 engines, stuff like that, and turning them into power plants for data centers. Well, you say, why not do solar? Solar's interesting. It's quick to deploy and relatively inexpensive on a per watt basis. The challenge is the batteries. If you're going to run a data center 24/7, you would need enormous battery banks. But what if you put them where the sun always shines? And that's exactly what we're looking at here. So what Google's latest Moonshot is, plans to put Tensor Processing Units, which, let's be honest, Google invented the Tensor Processor, into orbit to create a solar-powered, space-based AI data center. They're going to partner with Planet Labs, and Google will launch prototype satellites in 2027, testing radiation-hardened TPUs and laser satellite interlinks for a high-speed data transfer. So hold that thought. We're going to come right back to it. The idea is that orbiting solar arrays can capture 8 times more energy than an Earth-based installation, potentially lowering costs, reducing pressure on terrestrial grids. There is something called a sun-centric orbit, where if you put it in orbit and rotate it correctly around the Earth, panels will always be in sunlight. The thing is, so you don't need much storage for those occasional times when you get occluded, maybe. But you can get constellations of 80 or 90 of these satellites forming kilometer scale compute clusters. The challenges are cooling in space, launch costs, maintenance limits, debris, impacts. So at the same time that this is being discussed, there's been many comments by Elon Musk in SpaceX and to talking about them being able to do it on the back of a version 3 Starlink system. And I think we're going to see this, and we're going to see it in a very interesting way, because Tesla is building AI chips. They just taped out their AI 5 chip, and they're already on roadmap to AI 6. And Starlink has already prototyped its version 3 satellites, and the launch system is being certified. It'll be Starship. Basically, anyone that is going to do this is depending on something like Starship or Starship itself to come online, drop the cost of kilos to low Earth orbit significantly. But one of the advantages I see for SpaceX, they already have the laser communication links up there. It's already deployed. But Google, interestingly enough, has already tested their current version of the Tensor Processing Unit, and it does pretty well in radiation. For folks who don't know, when you're in orbit, Earth protects us from a lot of particle radiation, and particle radiation can cause bits to flip in your memory, electrical charges to change. And that requires special design constraints when you're going to be up high, and plays havoc with high-speed buses like DDR5 requires, which is where Google identified the challenge. John, do you have anything on this?
Yeah, so I think this is really exciting and finding new ways to increase capacity. We've said over and over again that AI is currently being limited by its compute capacity. So finding new ways to deploy compute. Now, interestingly enough, when you have solar panels in space, they are 8 times more efficient and they gather 8 times more energy per square foot than a panel would on Earth. And that makes sense.
No atmosphere in the way.
No atmosphere in the way. That being said, the fact that there's no atmosphere in the way also means that cooling, as you mentioned, is a problem. And just to put a little note on that, people think of space as being very cold, and it is if you're in shadow. But if you're in direct sunlight, it can get, the surface temperatures get very, very hot. And so the ships and the spacesuits have to be able to accommodate that. So that could become a problem here of being able to cool while sitting in direct sunlight. We'll have to see.
The good news is it's a problem we've solved before.
Yeah.
We actually know all the parameters of the problem. We know about vibration. We know about radiation. We know about infrared emissions. Yes, it's not trivial, especially when we're talking about the amount of energy that the TPUs actually emit as they compute. But it is a known parameter. Ain't cheap, but it's doable. Solve it once, multiply by as many satellites as you need.
Yeah.
So now we have a segment.
We have a new segment that we like to call Really, Microsoft?
Really?
And we're going to start with a small one, and then we're going to go to a big one, and then we're going to go to a financial one. So the small one is that there's a new update for Windows 11. It's Windows 11 25H2, and that has a bug fixed in it. And when you've seen, we have to do it so often, update and shut down or update and reboot. If you choose update and shut down, many times the PC that you're trying to do that on does not actually shut down and it reboots. So if you walk away, that system will come back up and running. And if there's a reason you wanted it shut down, then it's a problem. So this isn't such a big deal that we need to really freak out about it, but it's something you need to be aware of. And there is a optional patch that's available in the November 2025 preview and will then become part of the mainstream patch that's available. So you can go fix this right now. So, and it's just interesting as Windows 10 is starting to go end of life. We're seeing some of these types of issues with Windows 11, and Windows 11's already got kind of a negative rap. So this is just another thing against it.
Well, this bug was also present in Win 10. So this is something we've been dealing with for a long time. They finally got around to fixing it. I'm like, and it looks like it's just a straight up process bug. Let's talk about a little bit of a nastier one.
I'd say a lot nastier.
Okay, this is super nasty. Pay attention to this one. So there's something called a SesameOp backdoor, and it uses OpenAI Assistants API, but this is not an OpenAI bug. This is an attack on Windows. So let me run you through it real quick. Microsoft Dark Team discovered a backdoor called SesameOp that uses OpenAI Assistants API as a stealthy command and control channel. So the malware was uncovered during an incident in July of 2025. Threat actors had been present for several months before detection. So the victim's identity and precise nature of the target destined organization were not publicly disclosed. So there's a lot we don't know about this thing yet. One thing we do not know is how it got in there. But let me show you why you need to pay attention to this, because that doesn't matter. Rather than using a traditional command and control interface, which you can look for, right? The backdoor leverages the OpenAI Assistant API to fetch commands and send results. So this thing takes a legitimate API system from OpenAI and uses it to camouflage its control and exfiltration of data. And there are two things that you will see on your system if this thing is there. One is something called netapi64.dll, and the other one is called the backdoor module, which is OpenAI agent.net API 64, which is .net. So it uses .net domain manager, app domain manager injection of Microsoft Visual Studio utilities to load the malicious libraries at runtime. So commands are sent and received via the API's assistant object using fields like description, set to values such as sleep, payload, or result. Communications were encrypted and obfuscated. So why are we not talking about how it gets in there? This is an actual payload of an attack. If you have a chained attack against any Microsoft vulnerability that gives them the ability to load software, this is a very stealthy package they can load that will attack and exfiltrate data from your system in a way that is incredibly difficult. This is a 10.0 CVE. 9.8, 10.0. This thing is nasty.
And even worse is that there is no patch. And Microsoft's own webpage, and they've got a very detailed webpage with lots of data on it, and I highly recommend going through it. But their remediation steps are: make sure your firewall is updated, make sure you've got intrusion protection, maybe make sure you've installed Windows Defender. And they mentioned Windows Defender like 3 different times. And it's all about firewall and intrusion prevention and blocking the traffic once you're infected. So that's really bad. They got to come up with a patch for this, and I'm assuming that's coming, but it's something that you need to be aware of. You need to be putting in very strict whitelist rules. You need to be very careful about what you're installing, because one of the attack vectors is to come in and have an infected install of something. And that could be something that you've downloaded. It could be from GitHub, and it could be compromised code from there that then calls something else and installs that through this tool.
It could be a phishing attack.
It could be a phishing
coming in
attack
through one of your users. But this calls serious attention to what we've been talking about for the past couple of while here.
Yeah.
For folks who are not security minded or are not security engineers, the concept of whitelisting is you determine exactly what your systems need to talk to, and then you block everything else. And you don't do that on a per enterprise basis. You do it at least on a per segment basis. And if you can, you do it on a per host basis.
Yeah.
That is crucial. That will shut these things down.
Now, the thing is that that's a lot of work to do that. It is a lot of work. We understand that. But then cleaning up this mess is even worse. So, but the other good thing that happens, I'll give you, if you are building the whitelist, then you have a list of every service that you need to connect to outside. And then that can help you build a more resilient system when it comes to testing. For example, with the recent AWS and Azure outages, you might have been able to say, well, I've only got one DNS server, and that's in US East. Well, maybe I should have a second DNS server, or maybe I should have other services that I'm not so resilient on that if it goes away, that everything shuts down. So the whitelist is a good starting point to get you to that resiliency. So,
absolutely. And so, John and I have worked on security in our various guises. I don't think you can touch a network and not touch security at some point. If you're on the application side, you touch it differently.
Yeah.
But most people really have no idea what's on their network. It's been absolutely been the universal thing on my experience. And the thing I've got to warn you about this particular exploit is, if you haven't baselined your traffic to ChatGPT and have a pretty good idea of what it looks like, you're not going to know it either, because it uses ChatGPT to get that data out. All you're going to see is some data spikes. If you don't know what's normal, you won't know what's abnormal. Yeah. And that's a challenge. But you want to talk about another fun challenge? Because Microsoft never ends that way.
That's right. That's right. And this is a short one. So Microsoft has announced as of November 1st, it's ending its volume pricing tiered volume discount systems. So if you have an enterprise agreement, and for those of you that aren't aware, I'm sure most of you are, or all of you are, is that an enterprise agreement is basically all you can eat at a certain rate based on the number of employees. You get access to, Word, Excel, all the other tools that you've negotiated. And they've had a tiered discount system so that the bigger you are, that rate starts to go down. And they have, since as of November 1st, ended that tiered volume discount. So it's more of a flat rate going forward. And there's different tiers. They call them A, B, C, and D. And so what you need to be aware of is you need to go look at what you've negotiated, and can you still apply what you've negotiated to Microsoft to force them to give you the pricing that was agreed on. But be very aware when it comes time to renegotiate that enterprise agreement, that Microsoft's going to be playing a bit more hardball with you and not giving you those discounts. So your budget may increase dramatically if you're not careful or find alternative tools.
So, John, is it just me, or is Microsoft trying to drive everybody to install Linux? I mean, what the heck, dude? You blow up 10, and then you make it so that I can't move my TPU, my hardware trusted platform module. It's going to keep me from going to 11. And now you do this.
Yeah, it's interesting times to be a Microsoft user.
Wow.
But speaking of Microsoft users, LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. And before we wrap up, we got 2 interesting comments on LinkedIn from previous episodes. So one was from a company called Via Marketing. And they were just saying how it's interesting how AI adoption mirrors the tech shift and initial resistance and gradual acceptance that we've seen with other tech deployments in the past. And so I responded that that's true. You know, manufacturing robotics was pushed back against it, that it was going to take jobs. And there was resistance to cloud and resistance to going online and things like that. But they've all been adopted. And where would companies be if manufacturing companies hadn't adopted robotics? You can't just have humans putting every single piece together. So I think that's interesting. I'll put a side note on there, and I'll put a link in the show notes. There are stories out there when the push button, literally the button that you would push to start something or to cause something to happen, when that initially rolled out, there were people pushing back against that, no pun intended, in that it was something that was going to make us lazy and stupid and we wouldn't know how things work. The same arguments that they use against calculators and AI and spreadsheets and everything else. So I just think it's interesting to see that we're in that spot, and Via Marketing made a good point. And then lastly, Brent on LinkedIn asked regarding our just past episode where we talked about Unify and their SFP wizard, which lets you reprogram SFP modules. And the thumbnail I put up there was that Unify was allowing you to jailbreak SFPs. And his response was, why would you jailbreak an SFP? Leave my mail flow alone. And I explained what I meant by that, by being able to reprogram the modules. But anyway, and it's $50. So I thought it was a really, good tool. But thank you for the feedback. We appreciate everything that people do give us. And that is going to cover up this episode. We couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you, like Brent and others, where you leave comments and you let us know what you're thinking, whether that's on LinkedIn, whether that's via email at feedback@itsparkcast.com, whether it's on X at IT SPARC Cast, or if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment down below. We read all those comments, we respond to most, and if it's particularly interesting or insightful or entertaining, we'll read it out on the broadcast and you'll get to hear your name there. Be sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That way you never miss an episode. And from the world of enterprise IT, take care.
Thanks for taking the time with us. We'll see you next week.
Data center is coming along nicely. Cooling systems are fully operational.
Captain, the cooling system cannot take much more of this.